Ethan didn't talk much about his time in Afghanistan. Like most soldiers, he preferred to let the past stay where it belonged. His tours were rough, but he'd made it home in one piece, and that was more than some of his buddies could say. He'd settled into civilian life quietly, moving to a small house in the foothills of the West Virginia mountains. The isolation suited him. He'd taken to hiking the nearby trails to keep his mind busy. It reminded him of the long patrols he used to do, minus the weight of a pack or the ever-present threat of danger. But there was one trail he avoided. Locals called it the Old Logging Road, though it hadn't been used for logging in decades. It cut deep into the forest, winding past an abandoned mill and a scattering of forgotten cabins. People said the area was cursed, though no one could agree why. Ethan wasn't superstitious, but he'd heard enough strange stories to know when to keep his distance. That changed one evening when his dog, Scout, bolted into the woods after a rabbit. Ethan called after him, but the dog didn't come back. He could hear Scout barking deeper and deeper into the trees, and before he knew it, he was standing at the mouth of the Old Logging Road. "Damn it, Scout," he muttered, adjusting the hunting knife strapped to his belt. He didn't like the idea of going in there, but he wasn't about to leave his dog behind. The sun was setting as Ethan followed the trail, the orange light filtering through the trees. Scout's barking echoed faintly ahead, and he quickened his pace, his instincts kicking in. After about 20 minutes, he reached the clearing by the old mill. The building was a sagging, weathered skeleton, its windows broken and its roof caved in. Scout's barking had stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness. Ethan's hand went to his knife, his senses sharpening. He scanned the area, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. Then he saw it. At first he thought it was a tree, tall, gnarled, and dark. But trees didn't move, at least not like this. This thing was standing on two legs, its limbs too long and its body unnaturally thin, almost skeletal. Its head turned toward him, and Ethan felt a jolt of adrenaline as he realized it wasn't an animal. It wasn't human either. The creature let out a sound, almost like a growl, and Ethan's training took over. He dropped into a defensive stance, pulling his knife from its sheath. "Scout," he called, his voice steady but firm. There was no answer. The creature stepped closer, moving with a jerky, unnatural gait. Its eyes glowed faintly in the fading light like embers. Ethan didn't wait to see what it would do. He slowly backed away, keeping his knife between him and the thing. His heart pounded in his chest, but his movements were calm, measured. Then just as he reached the edge of the clearing, he heard a faint sound behind him. He spun, his knife raised, and found himself face to face with Scout. The dog was trembling, his tail tucked between his legs, but he was unharmed. Ethan grabbed Scout by the collar, his eyes flicking back to the clearing. The creature was gone. Ethan didn't waste any time. He and Scout headed back down the trail, his head on a swivel the entire way. Every shadow seemed to move. Every crack of a branch made him tense. He didn't stop until he reached his truck, parked at the edge of the woods. As he drove home, Scout curled up in the passenger seat, still shaking. Ethan's hands were tight on the wheel. He didn't know what he'd seen, and he wasn't sure he wanted to know. It wasn't like anything he'd encountered during his tours, and he'd seen some strange things overseas. That night, as he sat on his porch, Scout lying at his feet, Ethan couldn't stop worrying that whatever was in those woods had followed him. He kept scanning the perimeter of his yard, waiting for movement, but nothing came. Over the next few weeks, Ethan noticed small things: scratches on the side of his house, strange footprints in the dirt near his property line, and the sound of something heavy moving through the woods late at night. He never went back to the old logging road, and he made sure Scout stayed close to home and didn't wander from his sight. Ethan had survived war zones and firefights, but this was something entirely new. This was something that defied logic and couldn't be explained. There was no enemy to fight, no mission to complete, just an unshakable sense that something was watching and waiting. And no matter how much he tries to convince himself it is over, he just can't get past the fear. Jason worked as a security guard in Cleveland, patrolling warehouses and empty lots at odd hours. So he was used to the quiet and the dark. But that night, the one he couldn't stop replaying in his head, made him question just how much he'd ever really understood about the world. It started like any other shift. He was covering the old East 55th scrapyard on Cleveland's industrial edge. The area wasn't well lit, just a few scattered floodlights and a flashlight that barely cut through the heavy, damp air. Jason parked his car at the gate and started his rounds. He'd done this route a dozen times, walking the gravel paths between piles of rusted-out cars and stacks of scrap metal. Nothing ever happened here. Maybe a raccoon or a stray cat would startle him now and then, but that was it. Around 1:30 a.m., Jason was halfway through his patrol when he heard it. A sharp metallic clang, like someone dropped a pipe or kicked a loose piece of machinery. He jumped and then swept his flashlight toward the sound but didn't see anything. Probably just the wind, he muttered to himself, but he felt uneasy. The scrapyard was surrounded by a high fence and the gate was locked tight behind him. No one should have been in there. Jason decided to check it out more closely. He followed the sound toward a cluster of stacked car shells. The air felt colder as he got closer. He noticed how quiet everything was. Even the distant hum of the freeway seemed muted. His flashlight beam wavered over the twisted metal, casting weird shadows that made him feel like someone was moving just out of view. When he reached the source of the noise, he saw what looked like claw marks on the side of a rusted-out van. 4 deep gouges ran diagonally across the metal, as if something had raked it with oversized talons. Jason crouched down to get a closer look, his pulse quickening. The marks weren't fresh, but they weren't old either. They gleamed faintly, as if whatever made them had done so recently enough to leave a trace. That's when he felt it, a presence. You know how you can sometimes tell when someone's watching you, even if you can't see them? That's what it was like. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. Jason straightened, swinging his flashlight around in a slow arc. At first, he didn't see anything. Then his beam landed on it. Eyes. Reflective, like an animal's, but higher off the ground than any animal he'd ever seen. They blinked once, twice, and then the thing stepped forward, just enough for him to make out its silhouette. It was tall, easily 7 or 8 feet, and hunched in a way that made its movements seem jerky, almost unnatural. Its limbs were long and thin, and its skin, or fur, or whatever it was, seemed to absorb the light from his flashlight. His first thought wasn't to run or scream. It was this weird, detached kind of curiosity, like his brain hadn't caught up to the situation yet. He'd heard stories about weird things people claimed to see in the woods or on lonely roads, but he never believed them. Now he was staring at something that shouldn't exist, and all he could think was, "What the hell am I looking at?" Then it moved, fast, too fast for something that size. 1 second it was 20 feet away, and the next it was 10. Jason stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a loose pipe. His instincts kicked in, and he did the only thing he could think of. He aimed his flashlight at its face. The beam hit those reflective eyes, and the thing recoiled, letting out a sound Jason could only describe as a mix between a growl and a scream. It was loud enough to make his ears ring, and for a second he thought he might pass out. But the light worked. The thing backed off, retreating into the shadows, though Jason could still hear it circling him, its movements punctuated by the crunch of gravel underfoot. Jason didn't waste time. He bolted. He ran back toward his car, flashlight bouncing wildly in his hand. He could still hear it following him, but it wasn't running. It was stalking him, staying just out of sight, but close enough that he could feel it. The gate came into view, and for a moment, he thought he might actually make it out. That's when he tripped. His foot caught on a piece of debris and he went down hard, his flashlight skittering out of reach. Pain shot through his knee, but he didn't have time to think about it. He scrambled toward the flashlight, his hands scraping against the gravel. As his fingers closed around it, he heard the thing again. Closer this time. It was breathing, a deep, guttural sound that sent a chill down his spine. Jason swung the flashlight toward the noise, but before he could see anything, the light flickered and went out. He cursed under his breath, fumbling with the flashlight, smacking it against his palm. The breathing got louder. He felt something brush against his leg, something cold and rough like sandpaper. He swung blindly, his flashlight connecting with something solid. The thing let out another scream, this one higher pitched, almost pained. The flashlight flickered back on just long enough for Jason to see it retreating again, melting into the darkness. He didn't wait to see if it would come back. He got up, limped to the gate, and practically threw himself into his car. He didn't even bother locking the gate behind him. He just started the engine and drove. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely keep the wheel steady. He didn't stop until he was back in his apartment. Every light in the place turned on. He didn't sleep that night or the next. Jason didn't report what happened. What would he even say? That he saw what? A monster? No one would believe him. He wasn't sure he believed it himself, but every time he thought about going back to that scrapyard, he felt the same cold knot of fear in his stomach. He quit his job a week later. He tried to move on, to convince himself it was just a weird shadow. But sometimes, late at night, he'd hear that scream in his head, and he'd feel the same chill he felt in the scrapyard, and he'd wonder if it was still out there, waiting to show itself again. He tried to push it from his mind, but it's been a tough pill to swallow. Do any of you have any thoughts on what he encountered? Maggie always enjoyed her late-night drives. They were her way of clearing her head after a long day, especially after closing up the diner where she worked in the small town of White River, Arkansas. The roads were quiet, the stars seemed brighter out in the countryside, and the cool air coming through her rolled-down window was the perfect way to unwind. It was just her, the hum of her old truck. That particular night, she decided to take the long way home, a winding 2-lane road that cut through the dense woods surrounding the White River Wildlife Refuge. She liked that stretch of road, even if it was a little eerie. The trees closed in overhead, forming a tunnel that blocked out most of the moonlight, but she liked it. It was peaceful. Around midnight, as she rounded a bend, her headlights caught something up ahead on the road. It was hunched over just at the edge of the asphalt, and she slowed down instinctively, not wanting to hit it. But as she got closer, she realized it wasn't anything normal. The figure was too tall, its limbs too long. It looked like it was crouched over something, its back arched unnaturally, almost like a spider. Maggie hit the brakes, her truck coming to a stop about 20 feet away. The thing didn't move at first. It just stayed there, hunched over whatever it was eating or examining in the middle of the road. She reached for her phone, thinking she'd take a picture, but her hand froze. Something about the way it moved made her stomach turn. It wasn't like an animal. It was too deliberate, almost human-like, but off, like it was trying to mimic a person and failing. The thing finally noticed her. It turned its head slowly, almost unnaturally slow, and Maggie saw its face, or what should have been its face. The headlights illuminated hollow sockets where eyes should have been, and a mouth that was too wide, with teeth that gleamed like broken glass. It tilted its head, as if studying her, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Maggie's fight-or-flight instinct kicked in, and she slammed the truck into reverse, her tires screeching as she backed up. The thing stood up, unfolding itself to its full height, which had to be at least 7 feet. It took a step toward her, its gait jerky and unsteady like it wasn't used to walking. Her reverse gear maxed out, and she had no choice but to slam on the brakes and shift into drive. But as she did, the thing darted off the road and disappeared into the woods. Maggie hesitated for a split second, torn between flooring it and getting out of there or staying put to see if it came back. Her heart was pounding and her hands were slick on the wheel. Just as she decided to leave, she caught movement in her peripheral vision. She turned her head, and there it was, running alongside her truck, parallel to the road but within the trees. Maggie hit the gas, her truck lurching forward, but no matter how fast she went, the thing kept pace. She could only see it in flashes, its pale form flickering between the trees like a ghost. She sped up, her speedometer climbing past 60, then 70, but the thing didn't slow down. If anything, it was getting closer. Its movements were horrifyingly fast, almost like it was gliding or flying rather than running. Maggie's chest tightened as she realized she might not be able to outrun it. The road curved sharply, and she nearly lost control, her tires skidding on the gravel shoulder before she corrected. When she looked back toward the woods, the thing was gone. She didn't know if that was better or worse. Maggie kept driving, her foot pressing harder on the gas pedal with every mile. She didn't let up until she saw the lights of a gas station up ahead. The neon glow felt like a lifeline, and she pulled into the lot, her tires screeching as she came to a stop. The station was empty except for the clerk inside, a teenager with earbuds in who didn't even look up as she stumbled through the door. Maggie leaned against the counter, trying to catch her breath. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely pull out her wallet. "You okay?" the clerk finally asked, pulling out one of his earbuds. "Yeah," she lied. "Just a long drive." She grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler and sat down at one of the small plastic tables near the window. She told herself she'd wait there for a while, let her nerves settle before heading home. But as she sipped the water, her eyes kept darting to the window, scanning the trees just beyond the edge of the parking lot. About 20 minutes passed, and she started convincing herself that maybe it was over. Maybe whatever that thing was had moved on. She tossed the empty water bottle in the trash and stood up to leave. That's when she heard it, a soft tapping sound, like fingernails against glass. Maggie froze. The sound came again, and this time she saw it. The thing was outside, pressed up against the glass of the station's front door. Its hollow socket stared directly at her, and its mouth twisted into a grin that was all wrong. She screamed, stumbling backward and knocking over a chair. The clerk looked up, confused, but by the time he turned toward the door, the thing was gone. "You okay, lady?" he asked, but Maggie didn't answer. She grabbed her keys and ran back to her truck, locking the doors and peeling out of the lot without looking back. When she got home, she parked her truck as close to the house as possible and bolted inside, locking every door and window. She didn't sleep that night, and for weeks afterward. She also started to avoid that stretch of road. She told herself it was just her brain screwing around with her, and tried to convince herself that she had been overtired or that her mind had exaggerated whatever she'd seen. But every once in a while, late at night, she'd hear that same soft tapping sound on her bedroom window. She never did open the curtains to check. Months later, Maggie thought she had moved on. But then, every so often, she'd wake in the middle of the night to a sound she couldn't explain. The faintest tapping at her window or the creak of footsteps on her porch. Each time she stayed frozen in bed, holding her breath until the noises stopped. She never worked up the courage to look outside and still sleeps with all the curtains drawn. Anyone have any help for her?